our work so far, we've learned what the correct sight picture is, and how to get that picture into the sights of the rifle and hold it, whether you're prone, sitting, kneeling, or standing. Today, we take up the most important thing in rifle marksmanship, the trigger squeeze. By that term trigger squeeze, I mean the process you go through to bring your trigger back and fire your rifle. You know, when I was learning to shoot the rifle, my coach was an old sergeant who had fought in everything from Santiago to the Argonne. When we got to trigger squeeze, he told me something that has stayed with me ever since.
Soldier, the trigger squeeze is the heart and soul, the beginning and the end of all good shooting. With it, you can part the hair of any guy you're after as far as you can see. Without it, you might as well throw away your rifle and start heaving rocks, because you'll do a hell of a lot better.
That old sergeant knew what he was talking about. You can be a ball of fire in your sighting and aiming. You can be red hot in your positions. But if you can't teach that trigger finger to squeeze, 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 well, you better get yourself a supply of rocks, as my old sergeant suggested, because you're going to need them. Now, there's nothing difficult about the trigger squeeze. It's just a question of applying a smooth, increasing pressure to the trigger until the rifle fires. The trick is to apply that pressure so smoothly and so steadily that you can't tell when the rifle is going to fire. If you can't tell when the rifle is going off, you can't jump or jerk or, as we say in the Army, you can't flinch. Have you ever seen an untrained person fire the rifle? This is what happens. He gets all set, gets into position, draws what he thinks is a fine bead on the target, and then closes both eyes and yanks the trigger. And he wonders why he never hits the target. Remember this. It's instinctive, natural, for every one of us to close both eyes and tighten up when we fire a rifle, if we know when that rifle's going off. But when you do that, you spoil your aim. You not only miss the bullseye, but you may miss the whole target. Now, there's only one way to beat nature on this proposition, and that is to squeeze the trigger so smoothly and to increase the pressure so steadily that you don't know when the rifle's going off. If you don't know the rifle is going off, you can't close your eyes and flinch and spoil your aim before the shot is fired. The worst you can do is bat your eyes after the rifle is fired. And that doesn't hurt anything because the shot is already on its way. Simple, isn't it? Now let's see exactly how you go about learning this trick in your dry shooting. You practice the trigger squeeze in all positions, but you start out in the prone position with a sandbag because that's the steadiest, and it lets you concentrate on the sight picture and squeeze until you get the hang of it. First, you take the prone position and adjust yourself until the rifle points at the target without effort. Then the coach fits the sandbag. The coach takes his position, and the exercise begins. Cock your rifle, hold your breath and aim. When you get the correct sight picture, take up the slack. By trigger slack, we mean the play between the trigger's forward point and the point where you first feel resistance. Take it up decisively. While you're taking up the slack, you're starting your trigger squeeze. It's all one action of your finger, working by itself, independent of the rest of your hand. You press smoothly straight to the rear, and you increase the pressure steadily from start to finish. Your rifle has a fixed pull, say about 4 pounds. When you take up your slack, you take up part of that pull. Your constantly increasing pressure takes up the rest of it. And then the trigger gives, and the rifle fires. But follow through. Hold your position. Hold your aim, and continue your increasing pressure. I'll tell you more about that later. What I want you to get now is this. If you squeeze the trigger properly, you can't know when the rifle is going to fire, and therefore you won't be able to flinch. You all understand that? There's another mistake all of us make when we first start shooting the rifle. Practically everyone has a violent impulse to yank the trigger the instant the sights come in correct alignment with a target. The beginner is tempted, particularly in the kneeling and standing positions where the unsteadiness is marked. Your sights move a little, side to side, up and down. Finally, they come to bear exactly on the bull's eye. So, at that instant, you jerk the trigger. And this is what happens. You literally jerk your rifle clear off the target. You may not see it because both of your eyes will probably be shut tight and your muscles taut and braced for the shock. But whether you see it or not, the result is the same. A wild shot. There's only one way to get hits, and only hits count on a battlefield. And that is to squeeze the trigger. Now, you've seen what happens when you jerk the trigger instead of squeezing it. I'm going to show you why it happens. Let's assume that I'm shooting at a target 500 yards away. I've got my sights lined up on the left edge of the bullseye. Since the range is 500, I would be using a B target with a 20-inch bullseye. If I fired now, I'd hit the left edge of the black. Now I'm going to move the rifle 20 inches to the right. And let's assume that I've moved the butt and the muzzle exactly the same distance. In other words, my line of aim now is exactly parallel to my line of aim before I moved the rifle. If I'd fired then, I would have creased the left edge of the bull. Who can tell me where I'd hit if I fire now? Williams?
It had creased the right edge of the bull, sir.
Right. Do you all understand that? I can move this rifle back and forth 20 inches. And if I fired it anywhere within that space, I'd still get a bullseye as long as I kept my lines of aim parallel. I move the rifle 10 inches to the left again, still keeping my parallel line of aim. If I fired it now, I'd hit the bullseye dead center. But now watch this. I'm going to keep the butt in place and move the muzzle of the rifle just 1 inch. The butt stays the same as it is. I've moved the muzzle only 1 inch. If I fired now, where would it hit? Norton?
It would go off to one side, sir. I don't know just where it would hit.
Neither do I know just where it would hit. But I can tell you this. It would miss the center of the bullseye by about 35 feet. Get that, 35 feet.